Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session of International Business Environment. In our last session, we were discussing regarding the modern theories of trade. And in discussing that, we had discussed regarding two types of modern trade theory. First one being country similarity theory and the other one product life cycle theory. In our today's class, we shall move forward towards the third one, which is new trade theory, and it is the third among modern trade theories. Now, if at all we remember discussing, comparative advantage theory was based on constant returns to scale. But the supposition of diminishing returns to specialization looked more realistic. Now, this particular situation happens when more units of resources are necessary to manufacture each additional unit. But then in 1970s there were few economists and they questioned the presumption of diminishing returns to specialization in international trade. According to their viewpoint, they pointed that countries trade not only to take the benefit of their distinctions but to attain increasing returns that makes specialization advantageous, and thereby keeping this proposition they said that such situation leads to the exposure of new trade theory, and it was given in 1970s by Paul Krugman and other economists. Now, this particular new trade theory is also known as strategic trade theory. Now, when this theory was proposed, several contributions were made to understand and also enlarge the scope of international trade. And first among that was, now every industry or an industrial organization view had been incorporated in this new trade theory, where all those theorists or economists who gave this theory said that increasing returns to scale prevails only due to economies of scale. And they also said that economy of scale is curtailment in the cost per unit as a consequence of large quantity of output. Now, this assumption of increasing returns to scale gives review to imperfectly competitive markets. That is to tell, for instance, automobile companies experience economies of scale by manufacturing large quantity of automobiles from an assembly line where unique task is performed by each employee. Now, thus, by analyzing the major effect on economies of scale, trade will give consequence by enhancing the variety of products available to consumers, and simultaneously there will be curtailment in average cost. Now, this was their main idea between the economies of scale and how it is attained by an enterprise. And the new trade theorists or economists also suggested that the factors that were used in Exer-Hoyle's theory are determined by inter-industry trade. But on the other side, increasing returns which results from specialization within the industry drives intra-trade or intra-industry trade. And from this, there is coexistence between comparative advantage from factor endowment difference on one side and also increasing returns from economies of scale because of the difference that is there in the application of inter versus intra-industry trade. And this point makes it clear that when we compare the traditional theories and the modern theories, in modern theories, the scope or the factors that are included to understand international trade has been enlarged or widened. Now, along with this, under new trade theory or strategic trade theory, importance of externality is realized by new trade theory in international trade. Now, speaking about this externality, such situation prevails when the actions of one agent directly affect the environment of other agent. That is to tell government policies, political relation between countries, consumption difference between different countries, etc. are the factors which are included in these externalities. Now, these externalities are considered as alternatives to comparative advantage which directly influences international trade. Now, speaking about this new trade theory significantly focuses on two main points. First one is increasing product variety and reducing cost. Second one is economies of scale, first mover advantage and pattern of trade. Let us now try to understand these two main focused points of new trade theory individually. Wherein first one was increasing product variety and reducing cost. Now, considering that there is no world trade, it is difficult for producer to find economies of scale for products whose markets are not at all wide. Now, that would result in limited production of products in the market. On the contrary, when the size of market is expanded, under such conditions, definitely by using the opportunities and the concerned measures, industries can attain economies of scale. And therefore, according to new trade theory, trade is mutually beneficial as it brings in specialization of production and also realization of economies of scale, and thereby it results in the production of wide variety of products and also lower price. Now the second one is economies of scale, first movers advantage, and also pattern of trade. Now speaking about this, international trade is always influenced by economies of scale and first mover advantage. The advantages you know that the early entrants get into an industry are called as first movers advantage. Now, the output that is required to achieve economies of scale always points out towards a larger proportion of total demand of that particular product in worldwide scenario. Under such a situation, it goes without telling that only few firms get support, and the firms which are successful to establish their organization first will always enjoy the first movers advantage. Now, if at all you see the diagram that is being displayed in the PPT, it describes the new trade theory which results in realizing economies of scale, also incorporating real life imperfect competition in international trade, and also suggesting intra-industry trade between nations. Now, these strategic trade policies have been instituted by the national government to help industries in gaining or achieving national competitive advantage. Now, the main aim of these type of policies is to make a shift from perfect competition to managed competition. And when we tell that, we can understand that this theory mainly covers oligopolistic industry, maybe like aerospace industry to give an example. Now, to explaining this, we can take example of Boeing Airbus. Now, assuming that there is only room for one firm in the international aircraft market, if two firms decide to produce, then both of the two firms will incur loss. But then if one firm produces, then producing firm will generate profits. In this situation, if large amount is committed by the European government to subsidize the production of aircraft by Airbus rather than the expected loss, if both the firms remain in the market, then Airbus will be the leader of whole market. Simultaneously, Boeing will quit. Thus, government intervention is also very crucial when firms place strategically in international markets. But then, the one thing we should remember is no matter which government intervenes, what strategies the industry takes, World Trade Organization or WTO rules prescribe that no subsidies should be given, and these create barriers to free trade. Now, there are some of the implications of this new trade theory or strategic trade theory. The first one is that this new trade theory suggests that trade provides an advantage for mutual gain irrespective of differences in resource endowment. Now, this results in economies of scale that is increasing the variety of products and also lowering the cost. Now, when we discussed regarding the example of Boeing and Airbus, this particular example shows the country dominance in the export of goods because it feels lucky to have one or more firms among the first to produce that goods. The first movers in an industry may get locked in the world market that discourages subsequent entry because of the ability of the first mover to gain economies of scale. When it comes to technology, in this regard, we can also take into example of Google Corporation. Now, moving forward, Heckscher Oiling theory explains only the part of trade which is at variance with new trade theory. However, this theory does not replace Heckscher Oiling theory but complements it. Hence, the new trade theory suggests that whenever there is a predominance of a country in the export of product, and when it is well endowed with those factors, it is used intensively in its manufacturing. And when we have discussed all these things, we should also note that, on the other hand, new trade theory is not at all at variance with comparative advantage theory. This theory identifies an important source of comparative advantage as economies of scale increase productivity, and thereby telling that we finished the third one, or the third among the modern trade theories, that is new trade theory or strategic trade theory. Now, moving forward, the next one is Porter's diamond or national competitive advantage. Now, the early trade theories that we discussed emphasizes on the country or particular nation and analyzes the factors which would increase or enhance the competitiveness of those industries or countries. Now, after that, it switches to the industry or productive level, leaving behind competitiveness at national level. Now, under this particular theory, the notice has been given to how the conditions can be altered or changed within a country by countries, governments, and private industries so as to maintain the competitiveness of their respective firms or industries. Now, this particular theory was given by Michael Porter of Harvard Business School. who is a renowned leader in this particular research area. Now, in the year 1990, Michael Porter framed a theory of national competitive advantage that was published in his book, The Competitive Advantage of Nations. And according to his explanation, Michael Porter felt that the old theories of international trade explained only a part of the story, and thus his task in coming up with this new theory is to explore the achievement of international success in a particular industry by a nation. And he tells that initially a country's competitiveness was intuitively measured so as to determine its share in the world market. But the real measures of competitiveness is always productivity. And through this, nations will get support of high wages, return on capital, strong currency, and other relative advantage. Moreover, he tells that it is the companies that export goods or services rather than nations. That is to tell, an economy cannot achieve comparative advantage unless the companies operating in those economies are competitive. Now, the diagram which has been shown in your PPT describes the microeconomic foundations of the productivity that focuses on two aspects: sophistication with which companies operate, and quality which microeconomic business environment possesses. Now, that is to tell, highly skilled labor, the information, improved infrastructure, advanced research institution, and competitive pressures are necessary for sophisticated operation and strategy of company. Now, there has also been focus on shifting from comparative advantage to competitive advantage. Now, different strategies have been suggested for low income, middle income, and high income countries by Porter because it is the weakness at the advanced level which were the strengths at the earliest level. Now, under this theory, he is of the view that the effort has been taken to move to sophisticated ways of competing, which depends on changes taking place in microeconomic environment. Now, this particular microeconomic environment has been termed as determinants of national competitive advantage. Now, speaking about that, there are four broad areas have been given by Porter to shape the environment in which local firms compete and which leads to creation of national competitive advantage. Now, this particular diagram which is being presented in your PPT is referred as diamond. Now, the four determinants of national competitive advantage are: the first one, factor conditions or factor endowments. The next one is demand conditions. The third one is a related and supporting industry. And the fourth one is firm's strategy, structure, and rivalry. Now, the first one is factor conditions or factor endowments. Now, when we spoke about Heckscher-Hoyling theory, that particular theory proposed that comparative advantage emerges in a market condition due to the differences in factor endowments that the different industries or the different nations has. Now, these factor endowments explain the endowment of the country with resources like land, labor, and capital, whereas Porter differentiated between two factors: basic factors and advanced factors. Now, when Porter differentiated it to be two different, under basic factors, there included factors like naturally equipped factors, which included national resources, climate, the location, and the demographics. On the contrary to that, advanced factors included communication infrastructure, skilled labor, research facilities, and also technological know-how. Now, the complexity is seen in the relationship between these two factors, that is, basic factor and in advanced factor. And the investment by individuals, companies, and government constituted a product of advanced factors. That is to tell, there is a proposition that advanced factors are always necessary for achieving national competitive advantage. Now, initial advantage is guided by basic factors, which requires an extension in investment of advanced factors, and it is basically the disadvantages in the basic elements that results in making the investment in advanced factors. Now, the second one in the diamond is demand condition. Now, under this, it is said that home demand plays a necessary role in providing competitive advantage. Now, needs of customer should be taken into account, and competitive advantage is accomplished by firms in particular nations only if their domestic consumers are well demanding. Now, efforts have to be made by domestic firms to pursue innovative ideas in manufacturing products of good quality so that the demand for the products in the home country is always on the upsurge. Now, the third one is related and supporting industry. Now, this particular factor determine This particular factor determinant represent the presence or and also the absence of related and supporting industries, which shows the competition or the competitiveness when it comes to international economy. That is to tell, investments made by suppliers and related industries in advance factor assists in getting a strong competitive position in international market, and the main result of this determinant is signified that industry which have achieved success comprises of a group. Now this group is always and will be as a cluster of related industries. Now formation of clusters is necessary so that there is movement of knowledge whenever employees shift between firms within a region. Now, to give an example, this German textile and apparel sector is a cluster which includes better quality of cotton, wool, sewing machine, needles, and all those main factors which are necessary in production of products in that particular industry, and this cluster is benefiting all those within that cluster. And the last one in the diamond is firm's strategy, structure, and also rivalry. Now, this makes the important characterization of nations by different ideologies of management that either help them assist or also sometimes not assist in achieving national competitive advantages. Moreover, there is a strong link between domestic rivalry, which pressurizes firms for better efficiency in order to become good competitors, and also creation of competitive advantage in an industry. Now, there is also a evolution for Porter's theory. That is to tell, Porter's theory is a hybrid theory which shows that the presence of all four determinants is essential to complete diamond, and these conditions are necessary to achieve national competitive advantage in international trade. And also that there is contention that endowments are affected by government regulations, which simultaneously is affected by subsidies, capital market policies, which influences the consumers' needs. And also that relating and supporting industries are affected by government policies that influence firm rivalry through tax policy, antitrust law, and other laws of the government. And also we can note that this particular theory creates a favorable environment in which firms or acts as actually engaged in international trade. Now, in the last analysis could be countries should be exporting products from those countries where four components of the diamond are favorable, while importing products in those areas where the components are not favorable. And thereby we finish the fourth type of modern trade theory, that is Porter's diamond or national competitive advantage. Now the last one and one of the most easiest one is that intra-industry trade theory. Now speaking about that, it is difficult to measure, for that matter maybe any country. If we consider, it is difficult to measure a country's comparative advantage. This problem is related with the fact that an economy might export products that use the similar comparative advantage. However, it is difficult to determine which kind of products dominate. And also, a large share of international trade is not based on comparative advantage. Now, there is a criterion of a model which focuses on economic relations is affected by comparative advantage, and also that exceptional cases are ignored that will become important over time. Now, speaking about this intra industry trade, this trade means that trade within the same industry, which explains why countries often export the same products they import. This also describes how the countries get advantage from such type of trade. Usually there is common intra-industry trade between countries which is due to acquired advantage over national advantage. There is there is also a reflection of country similarity theory, which is also known in the process of intra-industry theory. Now here it becomes important that we speak about suitability of trade theories to certain kinds of product. That is to tell, if we are to tell in particular terms, we discussed regarding 9 different types of trade theories. 4 under traditional trade theory and 5 different under uh, modern trade theory. Under traditional trade theory, we discussed regarding mercantilism, comparative cost advantage theory, Heckscher-Hoylein trade theory, and absolute cost advantage theory. And when it comes to modern trade theory, we spoke about country similarity theory, we spoke about product life cycle theory, we spoke about a new trade theory or strategic trade theory, Porter's diamond, and intra-industry trade theory. But we should know that for which goods these theories are suitable. Now, it goes without telling that traditional trade theories are useful for homogeneous product, undifferentiated products, whereas modern theories are useful for heterogeneous products and differentiated products. Now, these new trade theories relax the supposition of constant returns to scale, and also these theories are based on the fact of economies of scale or decreasing of costs. And also, this new trade theories, compared to that of old, it relies on imperfect competitions. And there are some of the evidences which shows that intra-industry trade is greater in high-tech industries, whereas the rapid growth of new product leads to product differentiation. And also that as a nation's income increase, this kind of trade also increases. Now, big firms or big organizations experience the advantage of internal economies. But in case of external economies, the size or scale effects are located in the industry as a whole, but not when it comes to a single firm. Definitely, internal economies lead to monopoly competition. Now, entry of new firms increases competition, which leads to decrease in price. Each firm sells few units of output by dividing the market, and therefore cost definitely rises. Now, we should also remember that there is difference between the cost and the price. Hence, the presence of internal economies is the reason why firms want to enter export market. Now, this intra-industry trade provides two advantages. First one is market share is enhanced, which leads to decrease in cost. And second one, increasing competition pressurizes firms to pass their lower cost benefit to consumer. Thus, the pattern of international trade enables these firms to produce effectively, thereby achieving higher efficiency in the product. High level of efficiency would raise everyone's income through reduction of prices, and this would also increase consumer choice. And by telling this, the different trade theories, we have come to the end of different trade theories, and thereby we have successfully completed in discussing the first chapter. And the first chapter, as we have discussed, if you have noticed, it was divided into three different parts. The first one was basic introduction, which was not specifically mentioned in your syllabus, but which was necessary to be discussed so that you understand how there is a link between the business environment and also how what are the factors that are included in the business environment in the domestic country. And we moved towards discussing aspects which were particularly mentioned in your syllabus, which was maybe the overview of business, the importance of international business, and other such things. And later on, the third part was the trade theories, and we have discussed in detail the different trade theories. Now, when you go through international business environment, what happens is that there are topics which resembles similar, but then uh, you should always note that these things are to be explained when it comes to your exams from the point of view of what has been asked to or what has been asked in the question, and thereby we complete the first chapter. And in our next session, your next session would be at 12 o'clock today. In that session, we shall move towards the second chapter of International Business Environment. Now, speaking about your second chapter, it is nothing but continuation of first chapter, wherein you will again study the business environment. But then here you would be studying business environment in detail, and this business environment represents international business environment and not the environment of domestic country. The aspects that are there in that is definitely the same, but then the discussion, the explanation is definitely different. I have taken down your attendance so you can leave the meeting for this particular session and come back for International Business Environment class at 12 o'clock. Thank you, class.